In this episode, I talked to Shauheen. I met Shauheen roughly 6 months ago, and right away he stood out to me as one of the deepest thinkers I've ever met. As we were talking, it stood out to me that he has done a lot of research into historical rituals, specifically Zoroastrianism. One day as we were talking, he talked about the origin of esfand. For those of you who are not Persian, esfand is dried seeds of the wild rue plant. In Persian households, we're very used to the mother of the house burning esfand. Once it's burnt, it crackles and it releases a smoke. It is believed that that smoke has a powerful purifying and protective properties. It is essentially used to ward off the evil eye. And it's believed to cleanse a space or a person of negative energy or bad luck. Now, what Shauheen has done is that he has done a lot of research and has found out that the same compounds that exist in esfand are found in ayahuasca. He has also found out that these compounds were used in a substance called Haoma during Zoroastrianism rituals. In this episode, I really wanted to invite him to understand what are some of these rituals and frameworks that human beings have used throughout the time to cope. Basically, what are the rituals that have been done for thousands of years for well-being, and how can we implement them today? Shauheen has gave a lot of talks and lectures across the world. I think this bio of his speech that he gave at Harvard's Divinity School encapsulates what he's about. Dr. Shauheen Etminan, co-founder of Vesina and ancestor Magi, merges ancient Eastern medicine and mysticism with modern science to revolutionize the mental health through natural drug discovery. Specializing in phytochemical extraction, the neurochemistry of psychedelics, and the ethnopharmacology, Dr. Etminan investigates the pre-Zoroastrian use of psychoactive plants for spiritual journeys, particularly harmala compounds from the sacred plant esfand, uncovering their psychotherapeutic potential. With a PhD in chemical engineering and a dedication to the study and practice of Sufi devotional whirling meditation, Dr. Etminan exemplifies a holistic approach to science, spirituality, and wellness. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It really stood out to me as a mind-blowing conversation. Shauheen, thank you for doing this, first of all. This is
my pleasure.
Yeah, this is kind of random. And the reason I was very interested in talking to you is the first time I met you, I don't know if you remember, the first time I met you, we just randomly had a side conversation. Or maybe the second time I met you. And then you explained this whole thing about esfand and how you have gone and done research on where esfand comes from and how it has a psychedelic background. And we think that psychedelics come from a certain part of the world, but turns out Iran or ancient Iran played a role. And since I've talked to you, you're definitely the person who has just like a lot of interest in history and what has happened in the past. And it seems like you take a lot of you just have an insane amount of interest in it, which makes talking to you very interesting, right? Because the average person I talk to doesn't know anything about all of this. But I want to start by, tell me, when did you get interested in ancient history or religion or mystical experiences? Like, where did that start? What made you interested in it?
Yeah. Well, I think history is a reductionist way of referral to what we are referring to. It's not like a history is something that has happened in the past, and then you go after and then you try to see what that experience was. But a lot of phenomenon that happened to us, even though it has happened in the past, the effect is still the same effect. So I think
because we're human beings.
We're human beings, and because I think it's mostly from the lens of how you're looking into a phenomenon. But maybe if I'm going to step back from kind of like what I was trying to say. So what actually brought me to become curious, because I'm not really a person to be very interested in history, honestly. I'm not a best history person. I haven't been because, it's just history can overwhelm you. You can just keep reading, and then what really remains for me that makes sense that I want to carry forward is kind of like the way people were thinking and operating, and then let's say how you can use that today, in your life. And working on psychedelics, psychedelics is all about experiences, right?
Yeah.
It's about subjective experiences, somebody's experience, and that's not even shareable, because this is what you and your neural system and your you're kind of like in your exposure to something that is like ineffable is happening. Like even articulating it is not easy. So it is. I think my career brought me to psychedelics somehow.
So psychedelics was the first, like you got interested in psychedelics, and from there, I see.
Yeah. So, and the psychedelic science. Psychedelic science was what my background is chemical engineering. So that was brought me to working with active compounds that are psychoactive. And then that journey actually takes me to kind of like then looking into, okay, if these are where the psychedelics came from, that makes sense that like every land, because most of the psychoactive compounds are actually coming from the plants that people were using, and plants are most of the plants are psychoactive. But just the way that they are psychoactive, are they contributing to a human consciousness evolution, or is it just gonna add more ambiguity to the process that you're going through? So that's where the big distinction comes from, that like, okay, if it's not necessarily psychedelics, it's actually whatever that kind of like is synergistic with your neural system in a way that you would experience something more symbiotic with the everything else, like with trees, with plants, with animals, etc. But back to my experience, like maybe this is a story that actually a friend of mine, she was telling me that like this stays with her from how actually it brought me to this. This is back to 2018. That was the time that I had some psychedelic experiences. By that time, I was living in California before, and that was kind of like the age of underground, ayahuasca ceremonies, or like mushrooms were kind of like very available. So I had my own experiences, but I can never say that like this is something that I want to add. Like my biggest transformative experiences in life, it hasn't been my psychedelic experiences. So it's like some people, they had like this, like their mind-blowing kind of life perspective change. Revelations. I think revelations is like, you can always have revelations, but like something that like really changes your life after a ceremony, that hasn't happened to me. I'm sure that every ceremony has changed me, but it was not like one ceremony that I can refer to. So that was a time that I was, and I kind of like, I'm coming from a biotechnology background, and that time I was working on a company to create machineries for extraction of active compounds from cannabis. So this is 2018. 2018 is kind of like the very later years of cannabis industry booming, and then after that it was kind of like it went down. And by that time, I went to 2019 Burning Man, and because I knew that psychedelic industry is gonna explode. And I remember that like I was the year that I had my company launched, and I was very busy. It was not like very aligned with like going to Burning Man, but I knew that I actually went to Burning Man to do a conference. And it was like the psychedelic conference, and I knew that okay, this is gonna like unfold as something very big. I was doing also a lot of experimentation with compounds, just finding, okay, what are the active compounds in psilocybin mushroom, what are the active compounds in other things. But there was a day that I remember that I was running in North Vancouver, and I went to a store and to buy a piece of sage. I think I just ran out of sage and Palo Santo and all of these, and this was a place I was going, and I could just buy these things. And there was this corner of the store that had some books, and then like under that corner, like underneath, there were some old books. And I've never actually purchased any old books in my life, unless like something that like you can't find it. I think there's a website called ABE Books. I'm not sure if you know about it. You could just like buy something from the other side of the world shipped to you. But that was the only time. So anyway, like this book came with me to my home, and I had no idea like what it was. But this is actually written by a Romanian religious professor who was a University of Chicago professor that was actually murdered in the University of Chicago's library. Like basically somebody shoot him, and then apparently he was murdered by the intelligence services of Romania because of like how he talked about, let's say, religion, like all the kind of like religious studies. So he has this book. I actually have it here. It is it's about the otherworldly journeys of different traditions in the world, like different regions in the world, and like it has like a very thin chapter about Iran, but actually it's a thin chapter, and it's actually a very deep chapter because it's one of the only region that has a very documented referrals to the use of compounds that was allowing our ancestors to have otherworldly journeys, like to have like to experience the ineffable, like to intentionally access something which is beyond our mind capacity. Anyway, so that was where I actually just like got to learn about, okay, like our ancestors, which were like before Zoroastrians, and like during the Zoroastrians, they had this compound, they had like this intoxicant, like they call it an intoxicant. Like intoxication is something that there's a word in the Gathas, which is the old language in Iran. Just maybe to give you a background, when Indo-Iranian, like there was Indo-European and Indo-Iranian living from where today's Ukraine was, and Indo-Iranian, they go around the Caspian Sea and they come to the east, and then they call that as the area, the steppes. And then they start to come down, like still like they have the same language. This is 4,000 years ago, like 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. And then they start to separate as they come down, like to come south. And then like part of them, they go to Indus Valley and those areas, and then the language starts to become Sanskrit, and then the other part that starts to come to the steppes of Iran, which is Khorasan and today's Afghanistan and those areas, and then they basically their language is a dialect of Sanskrit, which is Avestan or Old Avestan. So so there is a word called Madhu, which in Farsi we call it Madhush.
Okay.
Madhush is like somebody who's losing his mind.
Losing their mind, like crazy, like.
I don't think there is a negative or positive connotation to it. It's just like something. Okay. I think Madhush is somebody who is usually can say that like somebody who's drunk is Madhush. Okay. Yeah, and anyway, like this word actually is like it's in Madhu is in Gathas, which is the oldest. Gathas is the oldest living text from ancient Iran, like the oldest that we know that this is exactly the same thing. And so there is this referral to the intoxication of priests of that time, that they were doing it for different reasons. Like the reasons are, there are multiple. I can't just get to that, but this was done by the priestly caste. That there was a kings and warrior caste. There was farmer caste at that time, and there were these people that they were kind of like doing the spiritual need administration to the kings and to the people. So
they weren't the highest level of society?
They weren't the highest level, but they were very close. They were elites.
They were elites who
were basically kind of very close to the king, and they were advisors, they were healers, they were actually the most important thing that's related to my work, they were dream interpreters. So they were like deeply into dream and anything that was in between this real realm and then like what is beyond this realm. So dream is the only humanistic understanding that we have as something that opens up the door to the divine, you know, like, and then you can have access to it every night, and then you come back, but we usually forget what the experience is.
Okay, so this gets...
So the dreams are very important. Like we had, like they call it, if you look into who were the magi were the healers, the physicians, the like dream interpreters, or people that they were, as I said, like administering to the spiritual needs of their own people. And at this time of Iran, it's very interesting. Like your people are mostly pastoralists. Like they are kind of like they're separate, living separately, and each group they have their own priest. And these are the old religion in Iran, which we don't know what it is. Some people are referring to it as Mithraism, like something that was related to Mithra, and this is like before Zarathustra, like it's before Zoroastrianism. And so at this time of Iran, actually rituals are very kind of like these, like they're very deeply into rituals. And I think what really makes us Iranians different than anybody in that area, at least like anybody who's left, you know, is what has been carried forward to our culture from a ritual perspective. That's like Nowruz, like Charshamba Suri, like Sadeh, like many of these are like rituals that we are carrying that they don't exist, you know, in other cultures. And back to for your first question, that when you said that, okay, what made you interested to history? So there were a few things that I started to learn through my kind of like, let's say from when I got to this space, which it's kind of like, yeah, chemical, understanding chemistry was one of them. But then I started to learn, like basically just like self-taught path that I had to do because of the company that we had. So it was neuroscience. It was neuroscience, psychology, and pharmacology. And then the last piece was phenomenology. And phenomenology, for those people that they don't know about it, is actually the science of understanding what you experience as a human being. And what we experience as a human being is kind of like something that you understand from outside of a human. It's kind of like the lens of phenomenology is not a human lens. The lens of phenomenology is like looking at yourself from an experience point of view. And like, what is that like you're experiencing? What is that you're experiencing with something that is beyond? What is like your higher self, or whatever that you call as God, or you know, it's divine.
I can't even imagine what that study would like. Can you explain that more? Like
phenomenology.
Yeah.
Phenomenology is the understanding of how things are that we experience, and then when it comes to consciousness, is exactly about like how is that we are processing consciousness.
Okay, I understand, but it's interesting because like
something. But I was maybe finish this just to connect all the dots that I mentioned. And in phenomenology, rituals are very important because like some of the phenomenon that are happening, we are inside them, but in phenomenology you have to understand what are the phenomena that are affecting our experience, and rituals is one of them. Intention setting is another one. Like there are so many of them, I can just talk about it like that. These phenomena are changing the flow of consciousness in a way that we may not even understand what it is, but it affects the way that we are processing things. It's kind of like looking into another domain that, because our knowledge is limited, we can't imagine how it is, but we are experiencing how it is.
Yeah.
And our experience is, because it's very reductionist. It's kind of like exactly that the story of an elephant, that you're touching different part of it, but you can't just see the big picture. But you know some of the phenomenon that affect you as a human, and then what affects your knowledge, like to shift. So anyway, back to when you come to psychedelics, something that is very important is the fact that, and this is coming back to, I think, our legacy of maybe most of the mystics in Iran, like what we carry forward, is that knowledge is not necessarily something that you gain. You can gain knowledge from inner journeys. And then how you can knowledge from inner journeys, what is the process of having access to not inner knowledge, is what you can explain from a phenomenological perspective. So, and that was happening also in psychedelics. So in psychedelics, you kind of, it's not, you get to know a lot of things. It really depends on like, it's not about all psychedelics, it's about some of the psychedelics. Some of the psychedelics like tryptamines, like mushrooms, LSD, like DMT or MDMA. They are 5-HT2A, they're serotonin agonists that what they do is that usually the process is the process of firing together and wiring together. Like what happens is that you get to process a lot of what has been accumulated in your
in your
memory.
In your memory.
Because consciousness is definition of consciousness is very different, like the way that people are putting it. But a lot of the consciousness that you process just sits in your mind as memory. And part of the memory that you don't have access to consciously becomes your subconscious, but there's part of it that you can remember and then you can utilize it, and that's the memory that there's a lot of the memories and a lot of the processes that you have processed, but you don't necessarily know what they are. So under these psychedelics, what happens is that because I'm not sure if you've seen this graph that shows like what happens under psilocybin. Basically, the different part of your brain starts to kind of like gets interconnected, and because of that, you get to process your own thoughts and events and memory in a way that like those thoughts, like it's like a high flush of thoughts and processing. That high flush of thoughts and processing allow you to have realization, to have revelation, to have breakthroughs, to have like understanding of things that have been not very clear to you.
Yeah, because it
kind of like it's your own. It's like processing. It's exactly like AI. Like you have taught it like so much information, and like you ask it to process that information and like generate new things. Yeah, right. That's exactly what happens on
the process of taking psychedelics, going through a psychedelic
not psychedelics,
experience.
Like the tryptamines.
Tryptamines,
yeah. But there are other psychedelics that's what my area is, and it's kind of like this very misunderstood, at least in the West, is that, and I think that's actually what comes from the wisdom of like our ancestors. Okay. And I think the South Americans also understand it, but they haven't been able to interpret it because they didn't really have mystics. Like shamans and mystics are very different. Like shamans are like that. Shaman is that crazy person, but mystics are like that wisdom man. Like that's the way that people were listening to these two people are different.
Let's define that. So like mysticism and
shamanism. Yeah. So,
but before we get there, I find it interesting. I asked you what made you interested in it. You said, I haven't had that big of a psychedelic experience where like it has altered my viewpoint on life. But then why were you so interested? Like, you said, I haven't had an experience like that, but then you talked about such a depth about
psychedelics.
Yeah, so you know what I mean? If you didn't have a very
but it's a tool, right? Like I know that it's a tool that I can use because the neurochemical limitation is a big limitation, and like a lot of people in life, they are suffering because of a neurochemical limitation. Neurochemical limitation is more like, again, from a phenomenological perspective, a neurochemical limitation is a mismatch between what your biology allows versus what your consciousness, like lives in peace, or like what you process from life. And a lot of suffering comes from a limitation in your biochemical processing. For example, like maybe this is the closest thing that I can bring as an example. Like when somebody goes through a divorce or goes through, or let's say losing a loved one. So what happens is that your life has a time scale, and it's kind of like, it's like a flow. So you have an understanding of what your life is, and then all of a sudden your life changes. It's like a big change. Like every morning that you wake up, you don't have your loved one by your side, right? So your reality has changed, but your your biochemistry hasn't changed yet. Your biochemistry every morning like kind of like gives you that message that like you really need like the same hormones, the same whatever that you need to kind of like feel the same, and but like your reality has changed. And then there's a mismatch between these two, between your reality and what your body allows. And this mismatch is what causes suffering. So if you can then do an intervention, like this, in this case is like a pharmacological intervention. If you can create a pharmacological intervention that kind of like shrinks this gap, like you're gonna suffer less. That's why like people, when they go through a divorce, like they can't just like suffer for 1 year, for 6 months, for 2 years. Some people, they can't even, some people, when they lose someone, like the rest of their lives is changed, right? But if you know that, okay, this is a biochemical like kind of construct that is happening, that's why neuroplasticity is very important, because you can shift the way that you think. But this shifting doesn't happen by itself. Like you have to overlay your life story over your receptor system, you know?
So there's like a couple of, there's so many interesting paths that I'm thinking about. One is like the mysticism and shamanism that we talked about. The other one is like, you just refer to psychedelics as a tool, and these rituals and everything that you can help, and I'm going to be reductive, to process life, right? Like I think that's what you're getting at, which is like life is, again, I'm being reductionist, right? Like I'm making it simple, but life is kind of crazy, right? Like going through life is just crazy things are happening all the time. There are certain rituals and there are certain tools that you can use to make sense of it, or at least, I don't know the way to describe it, right?
Yeah, I think there is, like there is a, I'm not sure, like, is it helping me kind of like open this up, or is it gonna, like make it more complex? But from a consciousness point of view, like the flow of information, the flow of knowledge, like unlimited.
Yeah.
So that is happening regardless of us, right? Like there's something that's happening in the world. Like it's just, we just process things that we process from consciousness. As a, let's say, if we count us as a biochemical cassette player, like a part of the life that we have, like in this 80, 90, 100 years, is like what we process from this thing, and then we define our life based on that. But in the flow of consciousness, that's happening in another scale, like how you can align your life to have, let's say, a better understanding of like how this phenomenon is affecting your life is something that is beyond human. That's why like the mystics or the shamans, what they do is that they try to bridge our life, our world, with something that is beyond our life, our world, which is kind of like, it's not humanistic.
It's divine,
it is more like, it's more divine. It's another side of us. It's another, like it's interesting, like one of the elements of shamanism that actually, like for example, like they say that like, did we have shamanism in Iran or not? Like one of the ways that they are trying to validate that is that one of the main elements of shamanism is the definition of a double soul. A double soul, sometimes they call it a bony soul, but like double soul is the main meaning. It means that like you have this whatever that you carry as a human, but you have a double in a parallel universe, that like what you do is that you try to kind of like get closer to your double in that unlimitedness. And for example, when the sign of Zoroastrianism, like they call it Faravaha or Faravashi, is exactly our double soul. Like it's like, wow, that's our double soul that, like you try to, but it's not an individual double soul, it's a collective. Like Faravashi or Faravaha is our collective double soul, that is like our collective higher self that you try to kind of like get connected to in this higher realm, like that, which is like non-humanistic realm. But what shamans and mystics do in general is how you can have access to this, what is that beyond human. Like shamans, they do it through, it's not always intoxication, it's not always plant medicine, it's not like, but but in general, something that even in ancient Iran, they were saying that the way to have access to this is always coming through a chemical. Like the chemicals is what opens this up. So it's something, but it's not necessarily that. It's something that opens these channels, and these channels are not necessarily, they don't need necessarily a biochemical alteration. You can induce that too. You can induce that by meditation. You can induce that by like other practices too. But what they were doing, they were kind of like, they were people that they had done it so many times that they knew how to transition between these two realms safely. So the work of a shaman is to open access to what is beyond, what is unseen, and then that's a person that have done it like safely, and they can facilitate that to other human beings.
I see.
Yeah.
And mysticism, so define that.
And mysticism is kind of like you believe that there is a mystical world, you believe that there is a soul world, and then you try to integrate that into your human life. If you accept that like we are kind of like we are divine beings that have a human experience, then you have to have, sometimes you can say that, okay, I want to have my human life, like that's my time, that's why I've been kind of like I'm having this entanglement with my body to have a humanistic life. But its downside is like what we see in the world, like, right? It's just very basic needs oriented, but that doesn't deny the fact that like we are really divine beings having a humanistic experience. And then like if you can leave that door open to have this kind of like whatever it is that's a divine experience, that's the path of mystics. And it doesn't matter like from which tradition. It can be Hindus, it can be like Buddhists, it can be Zoroastrians, it can be Sufis, it can be Christians, it can be indigenous. Like they all had this path.
Yeah, and they all do have it, right? This concept of like this
almost everywhere it hasn't. Like there has been times that, for example, there has always been a way to look into something that that could be also a construct, like because our experience is a human experience, right? Like we can always have just some, even like with psychedelics, you can have like some ineffability sense that, or let's say this, what they call like the sixth sense, like something that like intuition, something that you get beyond your ordinary conventional senses. But yeah, that's been human thriving to like what has happened always. Like there's always been a god. Like you go to Egypt, you go to Iran, you go to like any of these ancient civilization. They always like was a hierarchy toward understanding. And then when you see there was at the beginning there were kind of like more basic, not basic in a bad way, basic in a way that like they were creating souls for elements, let's say, like that's exactly paganism, right? Like the wind, or let's say the god of rain, or the god of water, the god of fire. So we have all of those. That's why we have fire. Like we have like in Zoroastrianism, we have all of these elements. It's not like about fire, it's about all of the elements. And it was the same, like Mesopotamia was the same in Iran. Like Mesopotamia is gone, like, but they had the same thing. Iran had the same thing, and then kind of like that's the human evolution, like mind evolution at that time. And then when it goes like from kind of like having these multiple gods, that they were kind of like a personification of a human in something beyond, because that was the way that they could just give character to these, let's say, higher beings. And then it gets evolves to become more toward like the fact that, okay, no, God is not something from our experience. And that's when the monotheism actually comes in, which is Iran is actually one of the very first monotheistic like philosophy. Egypt actually has one of them. Iran and Egypt are around the same time. Like they experience what the monotheistic, realization is. It's not a religion. Religion is always the most stupid version of understanding of the processing of thoughts, because then that's when it's been kind of like become like a book and then they just pass it on, right?
Versus more like
a realization.
Yeah, realization and really experiencing it.
Exactly.
So this is what I was gonna ask you. So in mindfulness practice, there's this whole concept like dualistic and non-dualistic meditation, right? And the whole concept being that non-dualistic meditation means like you get to the state where you can like whatever, close your eyes and just realize that everything that's happening, you're just realizing it, but you don't exist, you just have your sense of consciousness. Is that so? Yeah,
Yeah, that's exactly related to the same thing. That's the same thing. So the thing is, I think that I've actually thought a lot about this non-dualistic or dualistic. I think us as human, like even our human experience like when I say that like we are divine beings that have a human experience, that's dualism. Like our life, the chance that we are given is the experience of dualism. But we have got to the understanding that yes, like we are beyond this kind of like sleeping, like eating, having sex, and like, and then actually this is very interesting. Maybe I added here, but what is beyond is not something that we can experience with our senses. Like non-duality is not something that you can experience with your five senses.
Yeah.
That's why you have to shut down your five senses to be able to get to a non-dualistic state. A non-dualistic state is like the state of just oneness. And the state of oneness is exactly like when you have that, it's just like a glimpse of like the fact that like your mind is something way bigger than you. And then you try to, it is very interesting, like you try to position yourself toward that, but at the same time use it as a source to give you energy, to give you direction, to give you desire, to give you like what you thrive in your life,
And that in Persian poetry, like for example Rumi and stuff, like they talk about this a lot too, right? Like it's just fascinating that, as you said, like regardless of where, like all over the world, they had the same idea.
They had the same. Yeah, it's kind of. I think everything is the same. When I'm looking into anything that we're experiencing now, like looking into AI, right? Like AI is more like something that everybody's just talking about. AI is not as advanced as how people are talking about it, or how people have a perception of it. But the fact that everybody is thinking about it and the perception is because everybody's exposed, and the state of mind is kind of like it's going very collectively about this concept. And now we're connected, right? But even if we were not connected, like things when is kind of like this implication of dots, like yes, these places were probably very detached from each other, let's say India or Iran, but they were a big part of it. They were very connected too. Like if you like, they were saying that like Iranian empire had like 50% of the world population at the time.
Yeah.
So like the kind of like it was very condensed in that area. Like that area was like Iran, Mesopotamia, like that was the center of the world, and then it started to just kind of like get spread and then go around. I think like the human, like this thriving, I think this is really human evolution, let's say from worshipping a stone or a piece of rock towards something that like that experience of ineffability, that's something that is beyond, that's like non-dual. That's something that people have experienced. That's exactly, again, like that goes to phenomenology. It's like the science of experiencing, and then it happened at the same time. And then, like for example, now we're referring to Buddhism and Hinduism, like Zoroastrianism, like all of these things. But yeah, they were all very exposed and very interconnected at some time, at least from a human consciousness perspective, if you look into it. But there were places like still like that they have stayed very far and detached from the rest of the world, and you see that like they're still kind of very indigenous. But even in those indigenous people, like they also created, for example, like indigenous people here, they had a very special relationship with nature.
Yeah.
And through nature, they experience the same thing. They experience the oneness. They experience the non-duality.
So it's so yeah. Are we like? again, I ask my questions in such a simple way, but is our generation in the last little bit, we are, yeah, the death of God and all this, right? Like,
Yeah, that's,
so
I think
what
that-
is what is going on? Like, we are literally experiencing for the first time in human history
Yeah.
that we think as humans we are the know-it-all, right?
we are the
Versus
what?
know-it-all, as in like we
No,
are.
no. No, I think what has happened is that, and I think this was what we talked about when you asked me about, like, when we started
Yeah.
to having our conversation tonight, that some of the experiences are their time scales are kind of longer than a human lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like religion
Yeah.
is a, like, look into, like, the youngest religions are like these global religions like Islam, or there's some religions like Baha'is, or like the Santo Daime in Amazon. Like, these are like 100 years old religion. Like, they're religion like today happening. Like, you can't just go create a church and create a religion, right? But like this global, like this, again, maybe again from the same people, like these Iranians and Mesopotamians and Semite people, that like that this big religions, like maybe big the first three, like Islam, Christianity and Judaism, as kind of like has been created. Like, these are 2,000, 3,000 years kind of like management of what is God,
Yeah.
from a story that has happened 2,000 years ago, right? So what is happening, I think maybe with what happened in Europe and now maybe globally, what is happening is that, like, everybody at some point, like, they said no to the management or the leadership of their thoughts, or the way that they can relate to divine, at least, because the experience of divine is a very individualistic experience. Again, it's all about experience. Like,
not being taught.
It's not about not being told, or not being taught, or not being initiated by somebody else. Like, when you were a kid, like, you were Muslim, like something that you have to choose and something that you have to experience. Like, the experience of God, even Khoda, like, is just like to come to yourself. Like, it's like you really have to have this, again, non-dualistic moment by yourself to realize that, okay, like, that my life is not like this whole thing that I'm experiencing here. So at some point in Europe and in North America, like, they said no to this, mostly in Christianity. That's why they're closing all the church. Like, nobody is going to church anymore on Sundays, and now kind of like similar things are happening in Iran, with Islam, because of the way that, like, the system actually, like, orchestrated for people. But those religions, not the religion, those traditions that they kept the experiential narrative of these wisdom traditions, they're still active. They're still active. They're like, that's like Judaism or Kabbalah is like, people are like they're very progressive people. They're still like doing it. Or Sufism is the same. Like, there are people that are on the path. Like, usually these are the people that are on the path. Buddhism is the same, right? These are not Buddha. If you look into the Buddhism as a religion versus Buddhism as the way that we are looking into Western culture, like, the Western culture is like a very lenient, beautiful, like, narrative of what Buddhism is. But Buddhism has been very also kind of like very stringent and difficult to be executed. Even Zoroastrianism, like, Zoroastrianism at the end of the Sassanid dynasty, which is like the end of Zoroastrianism in Iran, like, it has been insane from the amount of rituals that they were supposed to do. Is like, if you were a priest, you had to dedicate all your life, and you had to be in rituals from like morning all the way to the night. So that's why they were saying that when actually Islam invaded to Iran, like, some of the people actually, they welcomed it, because that was like a very simplistic narrative of like what you had to do with all, like, if you just get into like how many festivals Iran had, how many prayers like they had, like how many moments of the day you had to have a remembrance of what's happening, like, these were like simplified later on. But I think what is really happening in the world, specifically, like, maybe, like, to me, the Western leadership of psychedelics is not, maybe that's the free way of experiencing the psychedelics, but it's not it doesn't have the traditions, or it doesn't really revere the traditions that they had experienced. Right? It's not looking into, okay, what this 3,000 years had as a living experience of working with this, like for us to, let's say, to bring to our today's life. Like what has happened is that like now that you have ayahuasca ceremonies in $10,000 retreats, and then like they come and they put the Icarus for you, and then like you it's transformative. But what I'm trying to say is that I think the thrive for accessing a divine experiences is still there. And when this intrusion of religion is kind of like is going aside, now actually there are people that are coming to having more of an individualistic experience of divine.
Yeah, which is way more effective.
Yeah, which is very humanistic, because we experience the non-duality. We experience the non-duality in dream. Like every night you experience a non-duality. You just get fully gone, and then and with something you get back. You know, which again, like that's established in our. If you maybe if I'm gonna like totally like change your perspective, imagine that our real life happens in dreams, and then for us to be able to make that dream happen, we wake up every day and then we work for 18 hours for our body to be able to process this non-dualistic experience at night. You know, that's could be a totally valid way of looking at this, right?
Well, this is where it gets crazy, right? Like when you just focus on consciousness, there could be anything happening.
Yeah.
But sorry, go on.
I'm just trying to close some of the loops that we had in our conversations. When you said about religion, the other thing is that the New Age, the New Age movement kind of like is like open this up, right? Mm-hmm. Like they open this, okay, like everybody's now trying to have the world is spiritual is definitely became cliche, right?
Yeah. But like a lot of it, right? Like breath work, all of these things.
Yeah, these are practices. Yeah. These are practices. But I think what has happened as a spiritual bypassing or something like, as a bypass. So what is the bypass? I think the bypass is very important because when you have a very subjective experience, like I can't say that like what you experience, right? This is only you. Like you take this I don't know, this blueberry, you had one experience, you take this mushrooms and you had another experience. You can just explain it, but I'm never inside you to have that experience, right?
You'll never understand exactly what
So what is missing in this discourse, in the psychedelics too, is that to have access to these non-dualistic states, you need to have a very solid psychological backbone, because if you don't have that psychological backbone, like that can be superstition, that can be like pseudoscience, that can be something that like everybody with like the minimum, like it's not about intellectual knowledge, it's about empathic, like empathy. It's about like more of something that you can integrate from a psyche point of view.
You're talking about an individual experience. Individual.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that yes, like there is a demand for these non-dualistic experiences, because we are divine in a like that we have like this humanistic experience, right? But if you're not prepared for that, like mysticism, that's why it's a path. It's not a shortcut. It's not like you can't just take mushrooms and you become something.
Yeah.
It's a path. And the path is the fact that you need to create all these prerequisites for having that non-dualistic experience, which is the most important part, is actually having a very solid psychological backbone. And so anyway, what I'm trying to say is that like just imagine that like if religions are gone, like gone, or they are not like having the impact, limiting impact that they have on people, and people can have their own experiences, which is kind of like what's happening now in the West Coast, like kind of like again, New Age experience, or like some of the New Age experience also like adopt a lot from Hinduism or adopt a lot from Buddhism, right? Yeah. What is important is that like that shouldn't be a scapegoat for anybody to explore something and then try to kind of generalize the understanding of life.
Yeah.
You know, because that's why kind of like it has become a cliche, because like anything, like even if you're talking about Buddhism, like the way that people are talking about it's become, you know, at the end, like we are having experience, we are collectively having that experience, like we write about it, like people record podcasts, there are like forums about it, like it's kind of like everybody is through this experience together. But what is giving the best way, I think, is exactly looking into some of these longer traditions, you know, which is
interesting. So let's talk,
because that's beyond one lifespan, right? Like that's the
But why is that necessarily because it has stood the test of time? Like what, like if you just think about it like...
So like a clinical trial, like in a clinical trial, like if you have a clinical trial with, like for example, like now MDMA or psilocybin, they're on stage 3 of a clinical trial.
Yeah.
So what they do is that like on stage 1, they do it with 15 people. 15 people is just too little of a population, right? And then they take it to, let's say, 60 people. And then on the last stage, they have to take it to 1,000 people, and then with the most diverse experience, right? So exactly like these experiences, when they go through time, it's exactly like a clinical trial. It's like a human clinical trial of something that has worked or has not worked. If it has worked, it stayed around.
Okay, so this is very, but like I think like when you hear this, I can imagine like my first reaction would be like, you know, like when you think of religion, you just think of like it got like forced upon you. I think there's a lot of like, you know, in your mind, it's hard for people to distinguish like the rituals, which maybe most people, like, you know, even most people don't know about the Sufis experience of Islam, right? Like if you ask an average person, they probably don't even know what a Sufi is. So let's talk about some of those rituals. What are some rituals that I mean, so let's talk about like, you said like psychedelics is a tool for getting to that state or feeling the non-dualism.
Yeah.
Let's just, what are some rituals?
I think anything that there are maybe when you come to ritual is what opens. A ritual is like a matching between what we have as a human experience, what is beyond us. When you open a ritual, what is happening is that like that intention setting is like the biggest part of a ritual. Like the fact that you hold the ritual is 50% of is that intention. So the equivalent of intention is a placebo effect. Like when you are taking a pill, 50% of like the fact that this pill is working, or maybe even more than that, like is actually the fact that you think that it's gonna make you better. That is why when you do drug development, like your reference is placebo, right? And then it's interesting, like people, they think that like a lot of the drugs, like which is this industry is like $1 trillion industry, right? Most of these drugs, some of them are mechanistic, they're doing something, but a lot of it, like the fact that healing is happening is only fractional when you compare it with placebo. For example, when the fact that you're taking it, you think that you're gonna kind of like improve yourself. It's crazy. This is crazy.
Insane.
It's insane. That's why like inner healing is a real thing. Like that's, I'm not sure you read Joe Dispenza's, he has a book called Beyond Human or something like that. He has a very famous book. I don't remember the exact name, but I think the first full chapter of this book is about a woman that like kind of like the end of the first chapter, you can't believe like how many disasters this woman is going through. Like the first, it starts with like he realizes like his husband has like committed a suicide, and then like and then she gets to kind of like a cancer, like it's just disaster. And then she comes to a point that like she says that like enough is enough. Like I need to get the kind of like get the control of my health, and then she goes through healing without anything. So whatever that is, that's related to that intention. Intention setting is something that can totally like change the flow of consciousness.
So it's not so much about the activity. It's just the intention that you said.
Just the intention.
Which is interesting. I read this blog post. It was like people have spiritual experiences in different ways. And I think that just kind of speaks to that, right? Like everyone has like whether you do it consciously or unconsciously, there's something that suits you, right?
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
And it's really interesting how human beings just have it's just a wide range of things, right? Like from like drinking or escapism.
Yeah.
To like, I don't know, modern day meditation, to hiking, to cycling, to electronic. So it's, that's very...
Yeah, this is interesting. Maybe I wanted to say this to you as well. I was at a dream conference 2 years ago, like an international dream conference. Actually, dream is still like not where psychedelics are, at least from a conference organization as an ecosystem, because it's very wide. But I was one of the keynote speakers was this university professor. I think I'm not sure what is his background, maybe anthropology or something like that. But he has written a book called When Animal Dreams.
Okay.
And this book, and then in his talk, he's actually University of San Francisco State University prof, and he was saying that actually this not the sentient beings, but animals like humans. Animals, they actually have 4 basic needs. Is eating, sleeping, mating, and the 4th one is intoxication. So animals also have this need for intoxication. Intoxication is whatever that kind of like altered your consciousness, whatever that kind of like changes that linear experience that you have about life. That's why people drink, that's why people smoke, that's why like everybody does something, because they want to have that kind of like non-linear extension of their kind of subjective experience, right? When it comes to psychedelics or let's say a ritual, that's exactly the same. But in a ritual, let's say, or in any of these practices, maybe if I'm going to deconstruct this, like a ritual, the main part of a ritual is intention, and then after intention, what a ritual does is a consciousness shift. That's why, for example, what is the rite of passage? The rite of passage is, for example, when people are 15 years old, like whatever years old, like when women start to have their period, like they become a woman, right? When you're still like you're a Muslim, like that's the time, right? So what happens is that there is an intention to enroll that person into that philosophy of thinking, and then is what is supposed to happen is that shift in the consciousness. Shift in the consciousness is not a gradual shift. It's like a very abrupt shift. And then what happens in psychedelics is the same. Like you come with that's why you set an intention, and then you're after that abrupt shift in your consciousness. So a ritual does that too. Like a ritual by itself can make that, like you put the intention and then you have that shift. That's why when people sit around, let's say doing a meditation, they feel transformed after that. When they do yoga nidra session, they feel transformed together. It's kind of like that is, again, these are phenomenon that is a little bit beyond human, but that we are inside that experience. But one step back, so this is kind of like the ritual, again, ritual intention shift in the consciousness, right? But
shift in consciousness is a result of the ritual.
I don't know. I think what happens is that, again, from a consciousness perspective, the accumulation of the intention of people who are participating in the ritual is affecting something that changes in the flow of consciousness. So it's more about kind of is changing the flow of consciousness based on changing the direction of the flow of consciousness based on intention. Kind of like you get the concentration different. That's why the shift happens.
That's a crazy sentence to me. Right?
Yeah. But let's look into the implications of it, right? Implications are these practices that we do, right? Like what, for example, let's talk about some of them that everybody knows, like breath work, meditation, what else? You name it, like running, right? Running,
yes.
Or
what I have. I don't know, lately I've been thinking about it. It seems like, at least from my personal experience, anything that's kind of repetitive gets me to that state. I don't know what it is. It seems like even when we're babies, you're rocked back and forth.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, from my personal experience, like electronic music does that to me too, right? Because you're listening to 120 beats per minute for like hours. So it's like very easy for you to get lost in kind of that, music.
Yeah, I think that's more about like the kind of like that experience of anything that's like a wave, right? Like because it's the frequency, right? It's about something that repeats itself.
Yeah.
It's something like I want to just like, maybe it's like mind blowing if I share it with you. When we started our company, the way that we actually did the drug development was based on tracking our own biomarkers.
Wow.
So we were I've done it like for over 50 experience or even more if you just look into the time. And then what we were tracking was brainwave. It was like a lot of like different biomarkers, which mostly brainwave, heart rate, like blood pressure, but a big part of it was actually like sleeping.
Okay.
Sleep. And then like we kind of like had a lot of biomarkers because of the implication of these, like how they're relating with each other. So what we were doing was that like our focus was only on these substances, like in my case, what we were extracting from SPAN, and also some of them they were also from other psychedelics.
Okay.
But we were also doing other altered states too, and then we're comparing these. Our baseline was meditation. So the baseline for us was kind of like 20 minutes meditation every time, and then we're kind of like doing it every time to be able to have a big population of meditation data, at least a sitting meditation, like kind of like you try to work on your breath and after that, and then we were kind of like trying to see, okay, like now let's compare it with, let's say taking mushroom, let's compare it with this, let's compare it with that. And I remember like I was doing about zikr. Zikr is like chanting in Sufism.
Okay.
Zikr.
Zikr. Okay.
Yeah. And I was able to. I was on a kind of like a practice of doing this for 40 days, and I could get. This was because it was so crazy. I was doing this zikr and just in a sitting meditation, and my heartbeats was going to 165.
Wow!
Can you believe it? Like, I was just like, it was every time it was crazy because like we were collecting the data, and then like our data analysts kind of like the science, they were looking into this, and then every time we were saying that like, are you just doing this physical activity? Are you running? Because like even if you run, like you get to 145 or like 135, etc. But just like by sitting and getting to 165, that was so crazy.
So what is it about repetition? What is it about wave? I mean, where were you going? You were listing these kind of activities that everyone does, and then I brought up.
No, I think it is. I think it is more. It depends. The base of looking at this is brainwave. Like you have to see at what frequency, like we get synced to what type of, let's say whatever that you're exposed to. If you're exposed to, for example, this is a high frequency zikr, right? Mm-hmm. Like that could be for low frequency meditation. For example, when you get to meditation, like at the beginning, they're saying that like you get to the practice of meditation is all about how you try to get from a beta brainwave, which is your analytical mind, to an alpha brainwave, which is more like you're not actively thinking. But people who are like really deep into meditation, they're all after theta meditation. Like theta meditation is when you try to even come like lower than alpha meditation. You kind of like, you're just present, but at the edge of falling asleep. It's kind of like, but it's exactly like lucid dreaming. Like you're trying to kind of step on the other side of like being conscious, but at the same time, you're very lucid and aware of the experience. So there's if you search about like, let's say again, theta meditation is the deepest meditation, what you can get to meditation, because you still have awareness when your mind is not wandering anymore. Your mind is, it's kind of like you're falling asleep, but you're awake, but in wakefulness. So it is, but what actually goes to higher frequency, like the higher frequency, that also takes you to what you can have from they call it a metacognition, like from a higher frequency perspective, like more like a gamma, which we know very little about it, like what really happens. Like this is going from, I think it's about 34 hertz and above, that you get to, you don't know what it is. Like this is kind of like when you get intuition, when you get to receive, like when you, like things that are beyond our, again, at least like what we understand today, we experience.
When you say the hertz, when you're talking about the frequency of this waveform, that like any sort of experience that you talk about translates to a waveform. So the zikr that you're saying, depending on, you're talking about actually the speed of the chant, or what are you?
Yeah, that's the technique. That's the technique that Magi knew too, right? Like that was their linguistic technology, that we know what Gatha is. Like they knew how to read this with the rhythm that continued, and then for people to keep taking it forward. At some point, it's not about the word anymore. It's about the rhythm. You know, like you keep saying that. That's why I was telling you, like they were mumbling. Like you don't know what exactly the word is, but like that's something like from a consciousness perspective. Like it takes you. I think it just frees you. You know,
it just frees you. Yeah.
Frees you. Like yeah. Yeah, repeating is that if you just watch Santo Daime, I'm not sure if you've watched Santo Daime. When I went to Amazon, I actually went to the Mecca of Santo Daime, and I think that was one of the biggest from a ritualistic realization that I had.
What is it? Define it. I've never even.
So Santo Daime is a religion that's been created by a Brazilian black man. About 100 years ago, and it's based in an area called Mapia, which is on the northwest of Brazil. That's where the ayahuasca is from. It's kind of like the southeast of Peru and northwest of Brazil. It's a province called the Acre. And the Acre is where kind of like the brew is actually from that area. So this person about 100 years ago, what has done is that this is just the craziest thing that I can, like, again, from a phenomenological perspective, I can understand, is that like he has brought elements from different religion, which we call the syncretic religion. That are all like techniques, and then he has brought these techniques into a religion that you do. It's kind of like I tell you all the techniques that you can have, like meditation, blah 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 blah, and then you take that into a super powerful ritual that you are on ayahuasca. On that ritual, and then you're moving. It's kind of like whenever you're talking about ayahuasca, is people, they think that like you just like drink it and you lie down and you keep like purging. Imagine that you have that purging effect, but you have to be on your feet for 6 hours while you are like doing just like one rhythm, 2 steps to the right, 2 steps to the left, 6 hours. 2 steps to the right, 2 steps to the left. It's basically like, it's like a hexagon. People stands in a hexagon. Like 3 sides of the hexagon, there are women, and the 3 sides are men. And the language is Portuguese because of the language of that area. but the elements are like, it's very interesting. There are, for example, the Star of David is one of the signs, but then the Mary, like the Virgin Mary, is actually like all the hymns are about her, Virgin Mary. And then these are the hymns that actually came through these people when they were on ayahuasca. And it's very interesting because the experience is not very so the brew of this region is not very DMT rich. It's actually very beta carbolin rich, which is actually what I'm working on, which is kind of like, it's more like it's something that it takes you from having an active consciousness to something more of a passive consciousness, which is like that. A passive consciousness is like alpha wave. You're still aware, but you're not on top of thinking. You're not on top of your analytical mind. And then with movement, which is again like a lot of repetition for many hours, like you get it. Like the experience is not a personal experience. It's like a collective experience. It's very transformational.
Wow.
And I think the transformation is more about it's whatever it is. It like people are so happy, like people are just very welcoming. They're like sharing their lives with each other. Like there are people like leaving different part of the world, just going to live in the jungle now because of the gift that they received from Santo Daime. And if you look into it, is actually what this guy, like this super genius guy, has done is that he has brought these elements together, and then brought into a very cohesive study, and then overlaid it into a ancient ritual, which was taking ayahuasca. And this ayahuasca, like to me, like you think that ayahuasca is like this psychedelic thing that all the kids, they're taking it with you, and they're coming and they're participating in this moving meditation. It's basically like a meditation in motion for several hours.
Wow. Okay, wow. I can't wait to research this more. That sounds insane. But let's go back to like the basic things that, like think of someone who doesn't even know, like about the connection to the divine or whatever, but everyone has implemented things, or like this new age spirituality that you kind of see. So we were going through the list, right? Like let's go through an example. Like you do breath work, meditation, whatever, yoga, those 3 examples. Talk about like breath work, kind of break that down. What's going on there?
That's a neurochemical alteration. That's a neurochemical alteration for your consciousness to become non-dual. And these are all the same thing. They are all a practice with an intention that alters you neurochemically in a way that your consciousness can expand. Let's say, for example, people that they go to sit in a dark cave for 40 days, like something that now people are doing it. That's exactly the same thing. Like because of your melatonin level changes, because of sitting in a very dark room for a long time, again, that's a neurochemical alteration. Meditation is the same thing, and the meditation is more like you sit in meditation a longer term. Like it's kind of like neuroplasticity change, intentional neuroplasticity change, but because it happens on the time scale of neurochemistry is the time scale of neurochemistry is one time scale lower than our linear life. Let's say, I'm not sure if what is your background. Is your background mathematics?
Yeah.
So imagine that like you put the time scale is like basically an algorithm of the current time scale. Like if you have t is the algorithm of t is going slower. That's why you have to sit longer. That's why meditation is a practice. You have to practice meditation in longer term to make that shift happen. So why? Because neurochemistry is a diffusive process. Neurochemistry is like a molecule by molecule. It's like charge, kind of like the pass of the kind of like charge over our physical, let's say neurons. Or, let's say whirling. Whirling is actually what I'm studying too. Whirling is rhythm, and it's also whatever it is. I think whirling is very cool. Actually, I think it is kind of like its alignment with anything that I don't know how it actually is. It can be alignment with anything that has we are constituted of, right? Like from a macro scale to a micro scale to like from a nano like subatomic scale, like everything is in motion, like that, whatever that is that make that alignment, which is again neurochemical alignment. That's more, I can say that like that's more around gamma wave, like something beyond. But what else? Let's say psychedelics, like all kind, like if you take peyote, if you take a magic mushroom, if you take like let's say Haoma, if you take all of these are again an neurochemical alteration for us. Or if you take alcohol, if you smoke weed or a cigarette, like there are these micro alterations that what you have to do is that if it's intentional and it's aligned with gaining awareness, so that's something that can serve you, right? And
serve you, yeah. So it's very important to have these experiences because it puts life in perspective. Like, yeah, why? Like, would you be able to explain why these experiences are very important? Experiencing this, whatever, like we just talked about this non-dualistic
because
glimpse of
yeah,
non-dualism.
because I think because other than that is like life is full of suffering.
Yeah,
like it is,
puts things in perspective. Like it's hard to describe, but puts things in perspective.
Like anything that you reach in your life is something that like after a while loses its spark.
Yeah,
like this past weekend, we actually like. This is just so crazy. Like one of the most leading researcher in the psychedelic science committed suicide past Saturday.
No, you didn't tell me this.
Yeah, This is Nolan Williams, who is the leading researcher in neuroscience department at Stanford, and we were working with him at the very beginning of our company. And this is like back in 2021 actually. And he was not very famous at that point, but after a few years, like he became the lead researcher in Iboga, kind of like a study of Iboga for veterans, kind of like traumas, and mostly it's mostly about. There is a movie about this. I invite everybody just to go watch that movie. It's about like let's say the injuries, like how they like very big injuries in. Like in a war zone, like kind of like Iboga can help that. And he actually came to Vancouver this April to present at TED. Like imagine like that you're a leading researcher in an area that is all about mental health and
so on,
and then you have 2 kids, like you're living in the best part of the world, like your best career, like globally being shined on, and then you commit a suicide. Like when you don't have that non-duality, when you don't know that the whole life that you do is aligned with being with having that connection with that double soul, that's when you lose. And a lot of people, they never know about it. They just come and they do a lot of contribution to life and then they leave. But what is aligned with humanity is the fact that like you have a glimpse of, because you can. Or maybe I don't know, let's say, for example, now if you go to Silicon Valley, like people that are getting a lot of attention are people that are talking about like how you connect with your intuition. Like that's even a way of like selling yourself, like selling success books and like become a famous author, in the intellectual kind of front in the United States. But whatever it is, it's about human experience, because we all have these moments of having intuition. We have all these moments of receiving something that's coming from beyond, because the rest of that, whatever that's a knowledge that we gain, is available to everybody else, right?
Yeah.
What is your touch on something that you create is actually what comes from your divine side. Like that's what's your essence that you put into that, and that becomes your creation. So I think the human consciousness as a collective, at least like from a leading perspective, that's like now we call it happening in the West. Let's say if we call it that. It's not necessarily happening in the West. The West is just louder about it. It's acknowledging it. It's acknowledging the fact that like we have all these exposures. And even science has been very reductionist about acknowledging the fact that like a lot of the science that we know is actually coming from many assumptions that we have, like this assumption that like things are not alive, assumptions that like atoms are not alive, assumptions that And then like when you go beyond that, you know that like there is a continuity of knowledge that overlays between everything, and then you try to tap into that. And Iran, if I'm gonna like very, very specific about this, is actually coming, I read this in this Iranologist that's, his name is Henry Corbin. Henry Corbin lives around the time that Carl Jung lived. And then he says that if there is one culture in the world, if there's one place in the world that they explored this non-dual state to a level that they could define and map the non-dual state. Map means like you go to different provinces and then brought that into literature and passed it on. That's in Iran. That's
because why it's like when you read the poetry.
Yeah, that's like if you Hafiz, Hafiz is, how come like Father Hafiz works for everyone?
Yeah.
Because he has gone to a state that's the state of intuition, and he's been able to bring that into a language that intuition then flows to everybody that reads it, and then it relates to you. It gives a message to you. How like Faleh Hafiz works for everyone, or for at least in most of the cases. It can be like what do they say, like what's the word, bias, kind of like bias, the error that you get because of the bias. Yeah, a lot of places it doesn't work. Like you get a Faleh Hafiz and it's not relevant to what you do, but from a poetic perspective, you know that this is not a normal text. That's why like everybody's so connected to him. Yeah. Same for Rumi. Like Rumi, kind of like he has been able to bring a higher state of mind from kind of like what is beyond that you can get into through love, and then again brought it into poetry.
Which is insane. Which is insane. But okay, so if anyone, for people who are listening up until now, let's say like you're someone who you don't know much about everything that we talked about today, but they had glimpse of, okay, like as you're talking, they're like, I have some experiences where maybe I've had glimpses of what Shauheen is talking about. What would you, I know it's, is there like a practical way of inviting someone to experience this more?
Yeah, I guess the most practical way is kind of like is dream practice. So every experience that we have is a conscious experience, like at least as long as if you call yourself like a conscious person, right?
Yeah.
And then the part of our life that is a collaboration between our consciousness and our subconscious on a personal level and the unconscious in a collective level is happening through our dreams. So the unconscious, which is over kind of like it holds the consciousness. Unconscious is like anything that we can't bring into language. We haven't processed and we can't bring into language. So we have that access to that through dreaming. Like I think dreaming is, specifically in the West, is a very reductionist pathway to dreaming because they look into it as a rest time, to your waking life, right? But the whole point about like what is maybe just getting back to the meaning of this word, like what is awakening? What is awakening? Yeah. Awakening is the most important awakening is happening when you're asleep. So if you can awaken in your experience of like sleep, when you dream, that's when you can have a flow to your what is beyond you. If like imagine like your feet are on the ground, like you're very agnostic to everything that is mystical, and you want to just have a spark of something that is a little bit beyond humanistic, just one level beyond humanistic, just as a spark of something that can give you a hope or a test of what is beyond a very materialistic understanding of human experience, right? That I think the best validation happens if you put intention into exploring your dreams as an integrated part of your life, not as something that you wake up and you forget, and then you go to your work and do etc., and then you fall asleep and then you try to disconnect. So if you because that's a practice. Like dreaming has been a practice in Buddhism, dreaming has been a practice in Zoroastrianism, dreaming has been a practice still is in Sufism, dreaming has been a practice in Christianity, dreaming has been a practice in indigenous, like dreaming has always been part of it. Dreaming is the door to the divine. But because we are not actually giving that kind of like, we don't have that perspective, like what we try to do, we try to bring it into, let's say, the awake, like the experience in the wakefulness. But what is an ayahuasca experience? An ayahuasca experience is a wakeful dreaming experience.
Wow. Okay, so how again, I'm trying to make this practical, but it's hard to make it too practical. But how do you do that? How do you become intentional about your
dreaming?
Dreaming.
Yeah, just like the easiest is just like every night that you go to bed, just remind yourself that you want to remember your dreams, or you want to have this dream, or you want to, let's say, you want to connect with this thing. You're looking for this thing in your dream. You want to be there in your dream. Like just bring intention and that ritual element to create that shift, to orchestrate that shift. And then when you bring your agency to orchestrate that shift, it's not like every time it happens, but it happens. And then and then that's why people, they say that like do journaling. That's why you go to see a psychotherapist. Like when you go to psychotherapist, everything that they ask you, they're trying to get to something about your subconscious, a piece of your memory that you don't remember in your childhood, right? And I have a theory about like what subconscious is that is like probably beyond the scope of this conversation. But yeah, that's kind of like a memory that we don't have access to.
All right, I think that's a good place to end it. I feel like we went all over the place. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for listening and for your.
This is honestly, every time I talk to you, I feel like it's like we go all over the place. I'm like, oh my God, like what a journey. I don't even know how long we talked for.
Yeah.
But crazy. Let me check on.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's 7:30. Oh my God.